Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Today's guest is Nitin Natarajan, a longtime public servant and first responder whose career grew by saying yes, taking risks, and figuring things out as he went. Nitin is the owner of NN Global, an advisory firm focused on critical infrastructure resilience, cybersecurity, healthcare, and emergency management. Most recently, he served as the deputy director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where he helped lead the agency with a multi-billion-dollar mission to strengthen the nation's cyber and physical resilience. Before Cisa, Nitin held senior roles across the federal government, including service on the National Security Council, as well as leadership positions in state and local government and in healthcare administration. Earlier in his career, he spent more than a decade as a first responder in New York, including service as a flight paramedic and as commander of a federal medical response team, deploying to disasters across the country. Nitin's career spans the field, the boardroom, and the policy table, and throughout it all, his guiding principle has always remained the same: do right by the people and make sure everyone goes home at the end of the day. Let's get into it. Nitin, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. You know the drill. The way we have to start here is do you have your coffee ready?
I do.
I love this mug. Tell me about it.
It's a mug from Maine that I got about 20 something years ago, and I
Okay,
got it because the nose is hollow and it just holds more coffee. So
that's perfect.
it's pretty simple.
What could be better?
Exactly. You can never have too
I
much
love
coffee.
it. That is right. I am with you. So I have a little bit of a confession. I'm easily influenced. And I was sold on the idea of this. Have you seen this mushroom coffee? Sounds so weird. Don't judge
Yeah, I
me.
have. Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't tried
Supposed
it.
supposed to have all these health benefits. So I can't go full blown like mushroom coffee. That just sounds weird to me. So I have a little bit of a hybrid. I still do my own espresso and my of course my oatmeal creamer, but I am giving mushroom coffee a go this week. That sounds so weird to say out loud. I'll report back if there are any health benefits for sure.
But so far, so good.
So yeah, so far so good.
Great.
So I always like to go kind of back to the very beginning of your journey, even before it started. I would love to know if there was anything as you were growing up that you like dreamed of being one day.
So my goal in life was to be an ER doctor. That's what I
Okay.
always wanted to do from like the earliest times I can remember. I was the kid who asked their parents for a copy of Grey's Anatomy when I was probably way too young to read it. I had medical posters on my wall. I watched Doogie Howser. I watched ER. I watched every kind of show that was out there. And I want to be an ER doc. That was what, I wanted to do my whole life. And I never
Yeah.
envisioned me doing anything else, honestly. So,
Yeah. So there was a hint that there was a calling to like either emergency response or some kind of service to your community.
yeah. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think a little bit of the chaos, right? I mean, it's not scripted. It's every day is something different, and every week is something different, and there's always something to learn. And so, kind of that opportunity to be kind of a lifetime student, and that opportunity to help people, and the opportunity to, I think generally I tend to thrive in chaos more than I thrive in stability. So, that career is perfect for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, first of all. So did you do any sort of like volunteer work or straight into college? Tell me about how you went from like high school into kind of the adult world.
Yeah, so at 16, I started volunteering on ambulances. I joined a local ambulance service in New York, and I started riding on ambulances. And I, got to treat patients and see patients and see the good in life, the bad in
Mhm.
life. My first patient ever was a cardiac arrest that
Wow.
I did CPR on, and we got her back. And
Wow.
so, kind of seeing that ability to help was something that started when I was 16, and I was passionate about it. I loved it. It was challenging, it was different, but there was also a sense of camaraderie amongst the team and with your partners, and it was just something that felt very natural. And where I know a lot of people get intimidated or scared or nervous about those types of things, I never was. I mean, there were definitely parts and times where you get nervous in that space, but the field in general did not make me nervous in any way. So it just felt natural.
Yeah, you were hooked from the beginning.
Definitely. So I did that for a couple of years, went away to college, like everybody does, right? I mean, my whole family,
Hmm.
you go to high school, you go to college, you go to graduate school, then you join the workforce,
Hmm.
and you do whatever. I went to college for 2 years and I got kicked out. And essentially, I
Oh,
was
wow.
on an ambulance more than I was in a classroom, because I loved it and I was passionate about it. And, I probably should have gotten more to class than more in the ambulance, but it was just kind of a calling. And I did that, and frankly, it's funny. I mean, it really changed the trajectory of my career. Obviously, I didn't go to medical school. Getting kicked out of college is not consistent with really going to medical school. But it opened up a lot of opportunities, and frankly, put me in places and times in my career that, as I think back, I wouldn't have been if I was, if I followed that straight path. I mean, who knows, right? What the other potential options could have been, but I truly feel like it actually worked out well for me. I did go back to college. I was a 10-year undergrad. Went to college, went to graduate school. So I did go back. But frankly, I also don't think
Hmm.
it was the right time for me. I mean, it wasn't, um, I wasn't as focused. I wasn't, into that aspect of my career. And frankly, when I did go back, I went back and I finished quickly, and I was focused on it, passionate about it. I went to graduate school, basically full time with two young kids under three, and so I did those when the time was right. I did them, and I think I did them well. But at that time, it just wasn't the right time, and I was enjoying life too much. But I think it worked out well. It was the right trajectory for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny when you look back. I mean, I'm sure at the time, getting kicked out of college was not the best experience, right? Like that was
My
probably
parents
a,
were not
a
happy.
hard,
Yep.
confusing time. They were not thrilled, right? But it was a pivotal time for you. What do you feel like getting kicked out of college, as you put it? What did that teach you about yourself?
I mean, to me, it was just about doing what you're passionate about, but also
Yeah.
that doesn't have to be a set path. And my kids are grown now, but I always tell them, I'm like, everybody has a different path in life, and it doesn't have to be the same path I took, the same path my parents took. And I would tell my kids all the time that, when you finish high school, you can do whatever you want in the sense of you need to be independent, right? You can go to college, you can join the workforce, you can join the military, you can go to a trade school. I don't have I'm not going to push any set path on you, but you have to do something, or you're not going to live on my couch for the next 20 years. But everybody has a different path, and I think all those paths can lead you to amazing things. And I think there's a lot of careers out there that have kind of a set career progression. If you look at, the legal field, you look at even medicine. I mean, there's a set kind of career ladder and path that folks
Hmm.
follow. But I think there's a lot of us out there that don't, right? When we follow the zigzag kind of, um, maze of a career. And I think a lot of that is opened up when you stop thinking about there being a set um, path ahead, and you just open to new opportunities, and you say yes to things that arguably you
Hmm.
wouldn't always say yes to. And I tell people that all the time. I had a chance to talk to a bunch of new college graduates when I was at Cisa, and one of the things I told them is I said, just say yes. Right. I mean, if somebody comes to you with something that's a little bit off the wall, that's a little bit outside your comfort space, say yes, because the opportunities that could lead to and the experiences that could give you are things you never would have planned for or imagined. I mean, I never would have thought at 18 and 20 that, I'd be I'd have a job and the opportunity to serve as a deputy director of CISA. I really thought I was going to be a first responder the rest of my life. I was passionate about it. It was a great job. I thought I'd do it forever. But by saying yes and by being open to kind of shifts and opportunities and career paths, I've had even more opportunities to do things I never would have planned to have done.
Absolutely. Well, you went from college. Did you go straight into full-time, becoming a paramedic or EMT, or was there something in between?
So I went to work at IBM. I was a contractor at IBM, where I did desk side support back in the mid '90s. So
Okay.
it was an interesting year. It was a good job. It was a full-time job, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. But I enjoyed the work. But frankly, that the corporate culture and the all of that just didn't sit well with me at the time, right? And so I had an opportunity to work full time in EMS. And EMTs at the time were making about $7, 6.50 or $7 an hour. And so I said, sure, I'll figure out life and I'll do this. And so I quit that job after a year. And I went into EMS full time. And, from that, went to paramedic school and, something became a flight medic. I was a volunteer firefighter on the side. So I had a chance to really do things that I was passionate about, things that I felt made a difference in the community, things that I felt, were providing a service. And so um, it was definitely the right move, but it really taught me early on that I want to do jobs and do work that I'm passionate about that are in the field and again in the subject matters and the areas that I feel where I can contribute the most. And so I was feel lucky that I learned that early on. It wasn't just about money. I mean, IBM paid much more than being EMT. But it taught me early on that I should, follow my passions and frankly do what I'm good at and focus on my strengths and not just following jobs to follow jobs.
Yeah, it sounds from everything you've said so far, it sounds like, the classroom environment, at least at that time, because you said you did go back, right? And I can relate to that too. I mean, it took me 7 years to get my associate's degree. I was working the whole time and I didn't think I needed to go back to school, but I think when you're young, I mean, there is a part of you that thinks you know everything, right? Or you don't really know, and where you don't really know yourself. You're still kind of getting to figure out like what works for you, what doesn't. What do you feel like that time in the field gave you that the classroom really couldn't?
I think it was a couple of things. I mean, one is definitely perspective, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
often joke in the policy world, people talk about, what's urgent and what has to be done immediately and what some of those things are. And I kind of jokingly say, like, there are decisions in life that are life and death, right? There are decisions that we need to make that have consequences, but nobody, but policy being an hour later or 2 hours later or a day later, because you want to do it right, isn't the same type of urgency. But people want to give it that same type of urgency, right? I think so. It really taught me about kind of the prioritization, what's really important. How do you look at that aspect of work. The other thing is really, to me, is about decision making. I mean, I think one of the things when you look at clinical medicine, there are times you have to make decisions for treatment with just a little bit of information. Sometimes you have to decide to wait for more information to make a decision. And they come with pros and cons, right? I mean, if you wait too long, your patient can suffer more negative consequences. If you rush too early, your treatment alone could have negative consequences. So it really taught me about that decision making and being able to really think through where could I wait and where do I need to make a decision quickly. And one of the things a lot of people have told me throughout my career is, why don't you give me an answer immediately? I'm like, well, I'm happy to give you an answer immediately. I'm not decision averse, but at the same time, not everything needs an answer immediately, right? Sometimes it is better to do a little bit more research, to get a little bit more data, to ask a few more questions before making a decision. Other times it isn't. Other times you need to make a decision immediately, and I have no problem doing that. But I think in corporate America and government often, and people think about leadership being answering things immediately and having all the answers kind of at your fingertips. And I treat it a little bit differently. I mean, the way I see it is that it's about making the best informed decision you can make. And sometimes you can do that quickly, and other times you need a little bit more time. And that kind of decision making for me is something that you do as a medic all the time. And it's something that carried with me throughout my career and really tried to help shape a lot, I think, of my leadership and my management approach.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I don't want to give away your age. You did mention that you were in this space, right, before 9/11. You mentioned being working in the 90s. That period, though, 9/11 really reshaped the system that was around all of us, right? But especially doing that type of work. How did your work evolve post 9/11?
So a lot of it was much more of a focus on the Homeland Security emergency management space. And so, especially being from New York, I mean, we lost friends, we lost coworkers. My team, my federal response team deployed down there. So we were there for quite some time. So it really shaped the bigger focus on thinking about what Homeland Security looks like, what emergency management looks like, what even healthcare looks like, right? And what roles should we play as we look at strengthening resilience across the nation. It opened up more opportunities. So my hospital wanted somebody to help. Grants came out. HHS came out with grants for healthcare to build resilience in hospital systems. And the hospital that I worked out of, I was based out of as a flight medic, brought me on board as a hospital administrator to help kind of build their grant program, to use their grants to help build resilience in the 7 counties right outside New York City. So it really allowed me to kind of expand, take my knowledge of pre-hospital care to really help the healthcare system in the New York City metropolitan area build resilience against, at the time, what we thought were, significant future threats, both in bioweapons, the potential for things like smallpox came up, a lot of those issues. Obviously, terrorism was still was on the radar, and what could happen next and how do we better prepare for that. So I think it really helped pivot some of the attention and focus on how do we go from response to more of that preparedness and resilience, and build resilience in communities across the country. And how do we do that in a way that makes communities feel safer, that allows healthcare to continue to be delivered during a time of crisis. And a lot of that work helped us during natural disasters and other types of incidents as well, right? A lot of the work and the money and preparedness that went in to terrorism preparedness or chemical, biological weapons preparedness also helped us to survive natural disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes,
Sure.
snowfall, ice melt, a lot of those types of things we see across the nation. So it opened up some of those opportunities. It's frankly what brought me to DC. I came down to DC to work for DC government to run their bioterrorism program. Um, and that was a point where I said yes. Again, I was happy where I was in New York. I was loving my life. I was a hospital administrator, and they let me continue to serve as a flight paramedic. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And there was a job posting in DC to run their bioterrorism program. And a friend of mine told me you should apply because it costs you nothing to apply for a job, and you can always say no.
Hmm.
And I said, they're not going to hire some random person from New York. I mean, it's right. I mean, and I applied, and they offered me the job, and it brought me to DC. And so, and that set off, what's been an amazing career here in the DC area over the last 20 something years. So, I think taking those chances, being exposed to things, trying new opportunities outside of your kind of your wheelhouse, saying yes, opens up some of those opportunities. But I think, post 9/11, I mean, the world did change, and it's still continuing to change as we look at, how do we continue to build resilience against cyber threats
Hmm.
and build resilience in our supply chain and other types of challenges we're facing today. And it's going to, so it was definitely pivotal for me from that perspective. But it's, um, it's something that I think everybody reacts to differently. Everyone had a different kind of response to it. Again, for us in New York, it was personal
Hmm.
because we had friends and coworkers that we lost. But I think it's something that's we'll always kind of carry with us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And same likewise in the DC area too. Was it hard to go from being in the field, being so hands-on, um, to more of like a, behind the desk type of role?
Definitely. I mean, I still frankly miss it today. There's
Yeah.
things that, um, but I also kind of knew I couldn't do it forever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's definitely a very physically demanding job, and it takes a toll on you. And so, you can't do it for 50 years, right?
Hmm.
You think about what retirement looked like, and raising kids on the schedule, right? You work days, nights, weekends, and so I knew I couldn't do it forever. So there are definitely times I miss it. I think the biggest thing about the pivot is the approach that I took was that time of my career helped shape a lot of my leadership, my management style, shaped a lot of my thinking, but I never carried it with me in a way that made me think that I'm still in that space, right? I
Mm.
mean, I've been out of the field for 20 years, 20 plus years. Um, I don't know what it's like out there today. I have an
Sure.
appreciation for the industry. I have an appreciation for the challenges that first responders face, but I'm not doing it today, right? The technology is very different, the capability is very different, the field is very different, and so it was a hard transition, but I think it was meaningful, and I think for me, it allowed me to represent that community in forms that where they didn't have strong representation before, and I think when you look at first responders, EMS was always kind of this, you know. Third entity that people didn't get as much attention as law enforcement and the fire service in a lot of communities. And so for me to be able to advocate for EMS providers around the country throughout my career has been great. And so, I had the opportunity to do things like, draft EMS week proclamations, and so, and doing so from the lens of a former paramedic, right? So
Mhm.
the words that I use, the references I make, and if you read some of them when they're drafted purely by policy folks, and again, it's not their fault. They just don't have the experience and the visibility and the exposure to that field. It's two very different documents. And
Yeah.
so, having the opportunity to do things like that to me to help advocate for that community was always, a wonderful thing and something that, made me happy. And so
Yeah.
yes, I'm out of the field, but I can still kind of advocate and support those that are still doing that job today.
Yeah, based on the experience that you had. I want to go back to something else that you said, which was your I don't know if hesitancy is the right word, but you almost didn't apply for the job in DC because you were like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not cut out for that. Or, they would never pick somebody like me. I think you've often, going through your career, right? You've often stepped into roles, particularly leadership roles, where in spaces where you really weren't the technical expert, right? Whether it was healthcare, environmental response, cybersecurity, what has your approach been to those situations?
To me, it's about being honest about what you know and what you don't know, right? I have no problem talking through what I don't know, and I don't know a lot. And I think as most of us move through our career, we know we understand that we know less and less.
Sure.
I never use the word expert. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. There were true experts out there that have studied and are, experienced, at depth in the subject matter. For me, it's about how do we help those people be successful. So when I left the White House, I had an opportunity to go to the EPA
Mhm.
and be the deputy for their Office of Land and Emergency Management. So this is an office that does brownfield, Superfund, RECRA, oil and chemical spills, kind of a whole slew of topics. Oil spills, chemical spills, I knew relatively well just from the emergency management space. But I didn't know much about Superfund, brownfields, RECRA, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, kind of the land cleanup type programs.
Mhm.
And now I'm the number two in the office. And so I joined that organization, and literally people came up to me and said, "What are you going to teach me about Superfund?" I said, "Absolutely nothing. I hope to learn from you. And these are people that have been around these programs since the inception
Right.
of the legislation, right? I
Right.
mean, they've been lifelong in this space." I said, "I'm not going to teach you anything about it. What I'm going to do is help you be successful. What I'm going to help you do is help you get the budgets that you need, help you get the program that you need, help you get the support that you need from upper management, from the interagency to help you be successful." And I think all too often I've seen people come into some of these roles that are adjacent, frankly, to their experience or a bulk of their career, and they feel that they need to be the expert. They need to speak with authority. They need to be able to do that. And I think that's when they fail because often, people know that they don't have 20 years experience in that space, compared to others. And so for me, the approach has always been, how do I help you be successful? How do I learn from you? And one of the things I'm always passionate about, and I tell people all the time that, I love learning from teams I've had the opportunity to manage because they're the experts. And so I get to
Mhm.
learn from them, but I get to help them be successful and help them execute their program effectively. Cisa is another prime example of that. I've done cyber policy work when
Mhm.
I was at the White House and in other jobs, but I'm not a technical cyber person. I'm not, well, I kind of call a hands-on keyboard kind of cyber person. But here I am stepping into a role at Cisa, and for me, it was really again, how do I help people be successful? How do I have the opportunity to learn from them, and set them up for success? And so, by coming in and not claiming or even trying to be the expert, but being willing to listen and being willing to play the role that I was hired to play, which is to help them be successful, as opposed to telling them how to do their jobs. Because again, and I'm not going to develop, right? A lot of these jobs, you're in for 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years.
Mhm.
You're not going to get 20 years experience in 5 years, right? It's just
Right.
not how time works. So I think being able to admit that and taking that approach is what has helped me. I think I feel I've been successful in these roles, has helped me do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the acknowledgement that you're not the smartest person in the room, but the willingness, and the drive to help them to be successful. I love that.
And
Um,
I never want to be the smartest person. I mean, if I
sure.
build my team correctly, I should not be the smartest person in the room,
Right.
right? I mean, if I've hired the right team,
Yes.
if I've provided them the right professional development opportunities, the right educational opportunities, I should never be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's helping them execute. The goal is to make them the strongest team that they can be, and
Yeah.
so I. People are something like, are you comfortable not being? I'm very comfortable. I hope I'm not, because again, that means I haven't done my job well.
Yeah, exactly. No, it kind of brings me back to something that comes up often, I think, on this podcast is imposter syndrome because sure, you can acknowledge you're not the smartest person in the room, but that can still show up, right? Like, do I belong here? Especially when it comes to career transitions. Did that ever show up for you? And if it did, how did you push through that?
I mean, every job, right? Every time. I mean, I think it's
Every
always there
day.
every day. No, I mean, listen, because of my kind of non-traditional path and because of the jobs I've had, I walk into rooms where people have undergraduate and graduate degrees from Ivy League schools, right? They studied at, they've been Oxford fellows, they've done, all these types of things, and
Hmm.
have amazing careers, unto themselves, amazing experiences, and
Hmm.
I often still see myself as a medic, right? I'm the guy working the bus in the street, and that's how I kind of see myself. And so, do I deserve to be here? Does
Yeah.
my opinion count? Should I voice it? Should I speak up? Should I not speak up? I mean, I think that's perfectly normal. And for me, it's been a matter of fact of somebody with a bigger vision, bigger visibility than I did, decided that I'd be a good fit for this role, based on my experience. And so, I have a seat at that table, and I should be
Yeah.
able to voice my opinion and talk through it. And yeah, I didn't go to Ivy League schools, and I didn't, I don't have a PhD, and like I can come up with all these things that I don't have that others have.
Hmm.
But it took some time, but I have experiences that others don't have as well, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so,
sure.
I've had the privilege of working in public health and healthcare and environmental emergency management, cybersecurity, critical infrastructure. I mean, not a lot of folks can say that they've dipped their toe into that many pools.
Hmm.
Um, so that gives me a perspective that arguably others may not have. And so, it's something I've had in every job. It's something I have in my current job. It's something I'll have in whatever my next job is. But to me, it's about some one person or a team of people decided that you were the right fit for this, and that you bring a perspective and an experience to the table, that they value, and I trust that to some extent,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and to be able to
absolutely.
follow that.
Yeah. Well, you talked about how your first responder background has really shaped how you think about policy, especially the idea that everybody goes home at the end of the day. How has that perspective shaped your decision making at the federal level?
So for me, it really is that motto, right? I mean, how do we make sure everybody goes home at the end of the day? And there are people in this country who leave their house in the morning, and with no guarantee that they come home at the end of the
Mhm.
day, right? If you look at our first responders, you look at our folks in the military, folks in the intelligence community, there's a lot of jobs out there, that are high risk jobs,
Mhm.
that, they're serving the public that have no guarantee of coming home at the end of the day. And after the tragedy in West Texas, where a number of volunteer firefighters and others were killed in the community, from that explosion, there was something that I talked about of how do we, if we're going to look at this from a policy perspective, and we're going to figure out how do we increase safety and security of chemical, stockpiles around the country. How do we make sure everybody comes home at the end of the day? And it's a phrase that I used in a lot of meetings. And frankly, a lot of people just couldn't even wrap their arms around it, right? So
Yeah,
that people would say things to me of, "Oh, so you just sleep in the office one night because you're so busy?" I'm like, no, it's nothing to do with where you're sleeping.
not
It
that.
literally
Yeah.
is about the risks that you were taking in communities across America, to do that. And so, if we are going to look at influencing policy, we're going to write policy to go out there and do that. How do we do it in a way that makes sure that everybody comes home at the end of the day? And I've kind of expanded that kind of beyond just the physical coming home. But
Hmm.
how do we build resilience, and how do we help individuals? And so for me, even policy, as we look at things like cyber, how do we protect people, in a way that is minimally invasive, but at the same time, builds resilience, and make sure that their day-to-day life is not impacted, right? That their day-to-day life can continue in America, despite foreign actors trying to cause harm in the nation. So that's kind of been my lens, on a lot of this, is making sure everybody comes home at the end of the day, and what are the steps that we can take to do that when we write policy. And I think often when people develop policy, there's a lot of things that could go in, or a lot of aspirational things that could go in, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fundamental issue, which is, how do we help make sure that people's day-to-day lives, stay the same or get better, right? I mean,
Yeah.
better is always good, but how do we look at that, and not cause more harm through policy, than we're trying to do?
Well, you have the unique perspective in that you have that lived experience, right, as a first responder. But as you mentioned, a lot of people who are working on policy don't. So how do you help your policy focused colleagues understand those life and death realities that they haven't experienced firsthand.
I think, I mean, this is why you build the teams that you build, right? It's why you
Hmm.
bring people from different backgrounds, from different experiences, to the table. And, by listening to and hearing their different perspectives on what you're developing, it allows you to mold that policy into it, right? So somebody who doesn't have my share of experience, but frankly might be an expert in economics, right? And can look at the economic impact of
Hmm.
things. There's a valuable viewpoint I have, little to no experience in from that perspective. And we need to hear that, and we need to
Yeah.
essentially bring those different perspectives together to do that. And that's why, to me, it's all about team building and having the right people at the table for the discussion, making sure the right people with equities have a voice and have the opportunity to share their perspective. Again, with policy, different things get weighted differently, and obviously there's the as things go through the chain, things change.
Hmm.
But I think when you start talking about initial drafting, you start talking about even some of the approvals, bringing those different perspectives to that dialogue are really critical. And so mine is just one of many perspectives that we should have. But I think we should always have some variability in those perspectives at the table. And the more folks we have, the better it is. I like to think of it as opting out versus opting in.
Mm.
A lot of people want to bring groups together and say, I know the five people that need to be in together, right? So you look at policy development when I was at the White House, the federal government does a lot of amazing things. Right. And if you're sitting within DHS, you have no idea necessarily everything that Health and Human Services does, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Interior, or all these different other organizations. Bring those different perspectives in and allowing people to say, listen, I have no equity in this. I'm going to eject and I'm going to opt out of this is a much better process than saying I'm only going to have these four people at the table, because there could be other equities that you don't even know exist,
Mhm.
that you're missing. And so I think there's ways to do policy development in a way that allows those voices to be heard and allows people to eject. And frankly, once you eject, the opportunity to come back later and say, I had equities that you ignored are
Yeah.
gone. And we've seen that in a lot of policy development where people build them in kind of these small silos. They go through the approval process, and in the 11th hour, somebody says, "Oh, you forgot. We have an entire program that focuses on this aspect that you didn't consider," and it causes the policy process to get derailed. So I think that there's ways, as we look at partnership, we look at opportunities to bring voices to the table to write good policy
Hmm.
that allows everybody's voice to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of speaking of, I guess, diversity of experience, right? By the time you came to CISA, you worked with all the different parts of CISA essentially before you came there. So what vantage point did that give you?
So it was interesting. As you said, I got a chance to work throughout my career with every part of CISA. So even going
Hmm.
back to my time in DC government,
Yeah.
I worked with local protective security advisors. When I was at
Right.
HHS, I did site visits with
Yeah.
PSAs throughout the country. Also worked with policy, worked with the communications team, worked with the cyber, with the physical security team. And it really let me see what the partnership challenges were, right? The viewpoint of working with CISA, not from the inside, but as a stakeholder. And as a stakeholder
Hmm.
in state and local government, as a stakeholder in the federal interagency. I spent time in the private sector, as a stakeholder
Yeah.
in the private sector, to bring that viewpoint in. And I think often in government, we think everything is going well. Our perspectives are very different from the inside than they are from the outside. And so bringing that outside perspective in as a partner to say, you think these things are working perfectly, these things are working well, but there's things that we can do to be more inclusive of our stakeholders, really helped guide that. It also helped me, frankly, from talking with a lot of different programs. My questions and my learning curve was a little bit different. I had to learn the inside, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I only saw the outside. I didn't see the inside sausage making, so that was eye opening and educational. But it really allowed me to ask more pointed questions and to reduce some of that learning curve on the programs coming into an organization that has such a diverse mission space
Hmm.
across both cyber and physical infrastructure. So it was a great opportunity. It was almost um, I won't say an end. I'm not done with my career yet, but kind of it was a great opportunity to come in after 15 years of working with CISA to
Yeah.
be in CISA.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, in terms of leadership lessons, what did you carry with you into that role?
I think it was similar, right? To be supportive and to hear from folks and to help people be successful.
Hmm.
It's to hear from our stakeholders and really understand, the voice of our stakeholders. And it's funny, I think in government, people like to group people into buckets, right? So often
Mhm.
one of the acronyms that I never used during my time at CISA was SLTT.
Mhm.
Right? Because we like to group state, local, tribal, territorial together. And I never use that acronym.
Okay.
I would always say, because states are different from locals, are different from territories, are different from tribal partners. And they all have different vantage points. They all have different challenges. They all have different scope, scale of programs,
Mhm.
of need.
Sure.
Or the private sector, right? The need of a large private sector multinational corporation are very different from a small mom and pop. They're
Right.
both critical in their own way, but we need to stop bucketing these things into these areas. So for me, it was kind of bringing some of those perspectives to the table and saying, how do we create an environment that allows all the voices to be heard, that gets feedback from the different perspectives? Again, what New York State and Texas and Florida, can do is very different from what a small town in the heartland can do. And so, as we look at creating policies, we look at creating programs, as we look at creating, field services, as we look at staffing levels, all those types of things,
Mhm.
we need to understand the differences in that type of engagement. So for me, from a leadership perspective, it was about that bringing that type of viewpoint on stakeholder engagement, to the front office and really having that opportunity to hear from folks, creating opportunities to hear from the team and the staff. I held a monthly coffee talk where I just talked to people throughout the organization,
Yeah.
just to kind of hear how things are going. And I think to me, the issue, I've always been kind of against micromanagement, but one of the things that I'm a huge fan of is what I kind of call micro visibility, right? It's how do I understand and learn about things in the organization at depth, and arguably at depths that my role would not normally be exposed to or want to get into. Um, but it really helps me advocate for the programs, right? If I'm on the
Mhm.
Hill or if I'm talking to stakeholders, to have that level of detail where I can advocate for the programs in real time versus coming back and getting more details. It's a little bit of a challenge, right? Because I think naturally we have this innate urge to engage and to manage or change or provide direction. But for me, I was adamant about not doing that and really about getting in the details and having that knowledge base of details of the organization that allows me to advocate more effectively. So
Yeah.
that deep visibility in the organization while committing to the lack of micromanagement. And it's unsettling, frankly, for first, second, and third line managers when I get to that level of detail, because I think the
Sure.
assumption is there'll be micromanagement. But I think as time went on, people realized I'm not looking to micromanage. I just want to better understand and learn about the programs
Yeah.
to advocate for them effectively. And to me, that's something that I carried with me throughout my career that's been helpful and something I'll continue to do when I go back to government, if I'm given the opportunity to go back to government
Sure.
to do again. So
Sure. Well, understanding that your career is far from over at this point, it sounds like your time at CISA was a really meaningful capstone in at least in your public service career to this point.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it definitely was. And excited to see what comes next. I mean, for me, I'll definitely go. I tell people I'm definitely going to go back to government service if I'm asked and if I'm given the opportunity. So, I'm looking forward to what that next iteration will be and the lessons I can take from CISA and all my other jobs and my careers, into a new role in the future.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said, what you've kind of said throughout, right? Is that kind of a constant theme has been saying yes, right? Trusting the long game. Why do you feel like that advice is so important right now?
I think as we look right now, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are looking for new jobs, they're looking for new careers and
Hmm.
trying to get a sense of what to do next. And I think, again, people get fixated that I did this, I have to do this, or my
Right.
skills are X, I should do Y.
Right.
And really being able to think beyond that and think about, you may not be a subject matter expert in this space, but your skills and your ability to lead, manage, and support a team are transferable, to other spaces. So apply to jobs and look at
Hmm.
jobs that frankly are outside your wheelhouse, right? And talk to organizations and companies and businesses that are not in the sectors or in the spaces that you would traditionally talk to. And if the opportunity comes up, say yes and
Yeah.
and give it a shot. And I think, I talk to a lot of people every week about job hunting and about their career and where to go next. And people are very fixated on I did this, so I have to do this, right? I was in
Mm.
marketing, so I need to get my next marketing role, or I was
Right.
in you know, But the marketing skills, if you look at communications, are applicable in a lot of different sectors. And how do you go out and do that? How do you focus on, again, on things like your leadership and management ability, and how do you bring that into a new space? So I encourage folks to not think of this as like a linear progression, but find out where's that next zigzag in your career, and apply more broadly. And again, you interview, somebody makes you an offer, you don't have to say yes, all right? So
Sure.
you can always say no. But if you don't try, you're not going to have that opportunity to make that decision.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great advice for job seekers when it comes to hiring managers, because there are folks who are trying to jump fields. This is a tough job market. What do you wish hiring managers understood better?
I think hiring managers to realize that you need to be able to be willing to accept people from outside your traditional space. And so
Hmm.
I look at the my boss that recruited me at EPA. I literally said to him, we went for lunch, and he said, "I want you to come work for me. I want you to be my deputy." And I literally said to him, "Why would I work for you? I have zero experience in Superfund and record like in these environmental spaces."
Yeah.
And his answer to me was, I have 1,500 people who know that. I don't have somebody who knows emergency management and who knows kind of this aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was willing to take a chance on somebody into a very senior role that didn't have, the same experience as everyone there, but also felt, I mean, he had that experience, but he also felt comfortable
Yeah.
that, there's a lot of other people there with that experience, and
Yeah.
that's not what was needed. And I think as people look at building teams, to think about hiring people that may not fit the exact mold of what you're looking for, but have the the attitude, have the willingness, the aptitude to
Mhm.
step into some of these roles, and they're out there. I talk to, a lot. I'll talk to private equity firms, VC firms, and they're always looking for the MBA types and this and that. And what many have realized is we have plenty of people who can look at financial aspects. What we don't have people who understand risk, right?
Mhm.
People who understand these other aspects that are critical to the work that we do, that didn't follow the traditional chain of undergrad, business school, and into the financial space. So I think hiring managers being willing to look at candidates in a way that, with a little bit more of open eyes, a little bit more of
Mhm.
a different lens, to see, if they have the right attitude, the right perspective, the right ability and willingness to take it on. A lot of people can meld into new fields.
For sure.
I've seen some people who've retired from government recently, who've completely changed their fields, right? So they did an early retirement.
Mhm.
I know one gentleman did an early retirement and then decided, you know what, I want to go become an EMT, after 20 plus, maybe 30 years of federal service,
Yeah.
and did that. He's like, it's something different. It's a pivot I want to make, and I can do that. And, people pivot all the time and they pivot successfully. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that we need to remember. It's not that every person who pivots fails, is that a lot of people have pivoted in their careers successfully. And so I think hiring managers being willing to hear and listen and interview folks, really is key. It's a lot easier to do in the private sector than in the public sector.
Mhm.
Obviously, just how public sector hiring is
Sure.
set up with position descriptions and requirements. But I think, especially in the private sector, being willing to listen to folks from different backgrounds and being open to kind of those non-traditional individuals, opens up the talent pool that you're looking to pull from.
Yeah. I think it's so inspiring to hear those, quote unquote success stories of successful pivots and how that can really open so many new doors and even to learning about yourself and new passions and all of that. I think that's really cool. When you look back at your career thus far, what do you feel like is the through line that ties it all together?
I think for me, it's been about public service. I love public service. I love being able to help the community. So I think that there's that. And then frankly, I think the other piece is community resilience.
Hmm.
Whether we're talking about in healthcare, whether we're talking about in critical infrastructure, whether we're talking about cyber threats, physical threats, it's about how do we build resilience in our nation against adversaries that are looking to wish harm upon us. And I think there's a lot of different ways to build resilience, right? There's building resilience in companies, there's building resilience in government, there's building resilience in communities,
Hmm.
there's building resilience with your neighbors, right? I mean, I think we've seen all these articles where, so many people don't even know who their neighbors are. right? And to be able to help in a time of crisis. We here in the DC area, we just had the massive snowstorm a few weeks ago.
Hmm.
And how many people knew their neighbors to go out and give them a
Yeah.
hand and to help out. So to me, I think it's those two things. It's been public service, and it's been, how do we build resilience in our nation against, an evolving and dynamic threat landscape, and a dynamic set of adversaries that are looking to kind of impact the day-to-day lives of Americans.
Yeah, I mean, personally, that resonates so much for me, and I'm sure it will for our listeners too, for many of our listeners, anyhow. When you look ahead, what is getting you excited these days?
Honestly, partly is not knowing what's ahead. Um, I ended up so I when I left CISA, I had some great opportunities to work in different sectors, and I didn't want to work in only one sector, so I ended up starting my own company, doing my own consulting, and it's been great that I could work in different sectors and work with in different domains and things like that. And so I'm excited about that and continuing that this year, and kind of seeing where that goes. I'm excited about returning to government service again at some point. Again, I've given the privilege to do so, and so I'm excited about just the potential opportunities that are out there. I'm excited about the opportunity to say yes again to something that makes me nervous and makes me
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I like uncomfortable. I mean, I kind of jokingly tell people I tend to work in organizations that are being built or organizations that need to be changed or developed and kind of in more of that chaos. I
Hmm.
don't do well in steady state. And one of the things I tell people is like, understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses. I do not do well at maintaining organizations in steady state. I think it's a different leadership style. It's a different
Hmm.
management style. Um, it's harder to maintain morale and esprit de corps in organizations that are not in kind of dynamic change. It needs a different skill set. And it's not, I don't think it's what I'm good at. And so for me,
Hmm.
it's finding that next kind of bucket of chaos that I can jump into and help with. And so, for me, I'm just looking forward to whatever that next bucket of chaos is that I can
Yeah.
jump into and help from, and then frankly learn from. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, having as diverse a career as I've had the privilege of learning so much about so many different sectors and the nuances and the details that go into keeping this infrastructure going across our nation. And so for me, it's also that learning opportunity to step into a new role where I get to learn the ins and outs of a whole different field,
Hmm.
and really understand how the machine works, and then how do I take that information and relay that to other sectors, right? I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of the lessons we learn from one sector are applicable in another. So being able to traverse that landscape and bring those lessons across areas to me is something I've always been excited about.
I love that your one of the themes I think has been learning about all these different sectors and fields and all of that, but also learning about yourself. I think it sounds like you've really gotten to figure out, excuse me, figure out where you thrive and where you work the best. And I think that's really important too.
Definitely. I mean, I think people need to realize again what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and be okay admitting it. I mean, it's
Hmm.
I have no problem admitting where my shortfalls are, where my weaknesses are, and I look for jobs and I look for opportunities that play to my strengths. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I joke when I was at CISA, there were days I'd have 20 meetings in a day, and people literally would say, "How can you do that? How do you jump topic to topic to topic to topic?" And I think it's just the way I'm wired, and I can do that. And frankly, if you told me to sit down for 3 hours and work on one document, I'd go stir crazy, right? I can't do that.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people who can, and that's where they thrive. And so,
Yeah.
it's not about, a weakness. I think we're all wired differently, and we're all
Yeah.
set up differently. We all have our own strengths, our weaknesses. And I also tell people all the time, there are jobs we should have and shouldn't have. I used to be a paramedic instructor, and I'd have students come up to me and says, I really, really want to be a paramedic, and some of it I have to tell them like, I don't think this is the right career path for you. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer. I should not be a bionuclear physicist. I should not be an auto mechanic. I should not be, an astronaut. There are things that I'm just naturally not, strong at. I'm
Right.
okay at car repair, but not enough to work on other people's cars. But I felt strongly that I should be a paramedic, and that I was,
Yeah.
that I was good at it. So understanding we all have natural proclivities to certain things, and it's okay that we don't have the proclivity to other things, and it's okay that we don't have the academic background or didn't do this or didn't do that. That's fine, and we need to
Yeah.
get out of this mindset that it's a problem or it's
Yeah.
damaging because I can't, I can't do everything, right? There's jobs out there I should never have.
Right.
And the world is a better place because I don't have those jobs. So it's okay to admit that and to focus on those areas where you will thrive and you will be successful. Often, it's funny. One of the things I've seen from a management perspective in organizations when people always talk about bad performers and things like that, in some cases, it's not that they're bad performers, it's they're in the wrong job. And I've seen
Mm.
people that we've moved into new roles and they've been amazing and
Yeah.
they've been very successful.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the individual, it's they just weren't in the right job that played to their strengths, their backgrounds, and their experience. So often, we need to go into these roles playing to our strengths and playing to that. And part of that's admitting where our shortfalls and our weaknesses are. And again, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, and people, I think, need to do more of that kind of self-assessment and honesty
Yes.
with themselves and with others, and be okay saying, I've had people interview for me jobs that said, this is a great job. I'm like, no, it's not. I literally told people, like, you do not want me in this job, and I'm going to tell you the reasons why you don't want me in this job. Um, and that's okay, because
Yeah.
again, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not good for them, it's not good for me. And so why force that type of a connection?
I think that's what's really interesting about the job search in general is it's, people look at it as like the job seeker is like one-sided. The job seeker is looking for the job, but I think it's very much a two-way process, right? Like, is this company or organization or nonprofit or whatever it is this right for me? Because it is really, a two-way street.
Definitely. I mean, every interview I did, I would end every interview with, "What questions do you have for me
Uh-huh.
where I can validate whether this organization, this job is the right fit for
Yeah.
you?" It's
Yeah.
not questions of, questions about benefits of the organization.
Yeah.
Where do you see me? Like, what do you see
Yes.
as my biggest challenges in 90 days, 120 days, like that? But are we the right fit for you? Because if
Yeah.
we're not going to be the right fit for you, I don't want you to be miserable. I don't want to be miserable.
Right.
And we need to spend more of that time of making sure it is a bilateral fit. And I think when job markets are tough, it's hard, right? I mean, yeah, I know folks that have been job hunting for 6 months to a year or more,
Hmm.
and it's hard for them to be able to say, um, the instinct is to jump at what's there, right?
Yes.
Versus making sure it's a right fit. I'll see from a lot of people they're hearing feedback of they're either overqualified or they've been out of the job market too long. And this is where again I encourage hiring managers. I mean, the way to solve people who've been out of the job market too long is to hire
Hire
them and
them.
get them back in the workforce.
That's an
And
idea.
I do think that the other thing I'll flag just as a somebody who used to be a hiring manager, a lot of people who are overqualified for jobs are applying for jobs that they're passionate about and they want to do. So, yes, they may be overqualified, but they understand they're taking a step down,
Sure.
quote unquote, right, in this perceived hierarchy of careers. They understand they're stepping into a different role. They understand it's a more junior role. They understand that it may not be, they were managers before, now they're in a non-management role. There's nothing wrong with that. And arguably, these
Mhm.
individuals are going to bring, a higher level of skill, a higher level of experience, the opportunity to provide mentorship to others and things like that I think are out there. And I always, when I think about people who say that you're overqualified, I'm not going to hire you. Well, if you're willing to work for the salary and benefits that are being provided and you have the right experience and bring to the table, isn't the goal to always hire people who have more qualifications than what you're looking for as
Over.
the,
Yeah.
into a role? If I can get somebody with 20 years experience where I was looking for 10, arguably isn't that better if they understand the salary benefits and all of that type and the structure and management
Hmm.
role, non-management role, those types of things. So it always astounds me when I hear from folks, regularly, oh, I interviewed for this great job, but they said I'm overqualified. I'm like, who keeps turning down these people who have all the qualifications and more and are willing to work within the parameters of what you're looking for, and you're
Sure.
saying no to them?
Sure.
I don't
And
understand that.
and there's life and like personal circumstances too, right? Like sometimes you're burned out, you've been in the leadership role, you've been doing, but you want to
Yep.
take a step back, whether it's because of your family situation or just because you want to work and contribute, in a different way. And I think you're right that hiring managers need to be open to that too.
I we had a gentleman in an organization I worked in that had been a CEO in multiple multi-million dollar organizations, right? And wanted a position at a very junior level.
Yeah.
He'd been retired multiple times over. And I literally said to the individual, I'm like, you understand what we're going to pay you, right? I mean, it's, I mean, nowhere near,
Yeah.
it's a fraction of where you were before. And the gentleman said to me, he goes, I know exactly what I'm signing up for, but I'm passionate about the work. I want to do it. It's something at this stage of my career, I want to devote my time to.
Yeah.
And I could very easily have said, you are way overqualified by leaps and bounds for this. But he wanted to do it. He was
Yeah.
willing to do it. He had the experience, and we hired him to
Yeah.
do it. And so,
I love that.
again, I think there's things like that where I'm so mind boggled by hiring managers who see overqualification as a negative. Now, again, eyes wide open, it can be a problem with some people where they come in expecting X and then within a few months they expect something different because they feel
Hmm.
they're entitled to a certain stature or what have you. So you do have to be a little bit careful. But I think generally, people who have the skills and the competency and the experience that you're looking for, it's not a bad thing,
Yeah.
especially in today's job market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I have enjoyed it so much. Where can people go to see your work or learn more about what you're doing now?
Sure. So I have a website, nnglobal.us, and then I'm on LinkedIn. So I encourage folks to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can learn from them on what they're doing and where they're going,
Yes,
and folks will have a chance to see what I'm up to.
I love it so much. Thank you so much for doing this with me. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers and Coffee Talk. Big thanks to today's guest for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. Anyway, until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.